The world awoke today, June 22, 2025, a day that many had feared but few truly anticipated. To a Middle East teetering on the edge of a catastrophic war, a conflict that threatens to engulf the entire region and potentially draw in global powers. The stakes have never been higher. In Tehran, outrage erupted, a firestorm of anger sweeping through the streets, after overnight American airstrikes targeted Iran's most sensitive facilities, including, allegedly, sites linked to its nuclear program. The strikes were precise, but their impact is far-reaching. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi condemned the U.S. action in the strongest possible terms, as a blatant violation of sovereignty and international law, an act of aggression that cannot and will not go unanswered. He warned of everlasting consequences for the United States and its allies, consequences that would reshape the geopolitical landscape of the Middle East. Tehran's message: this was not a mere provocation, a simple act of defiance, but a declaration of war, a line crossed that cannot be uncrossed. Araghchi vowed Iran would respond swiftly and decisively to defend its interests and its people. To any further aggression, signaling the complete and utter end of diplomatic normalcy, and any hope for reconciliation with Washington. The region's fragile stability now hangs by a thread, threatening to unravel decades of delicate diplomacy. As Iran weighs its military options, carefully considering the potential consequences of each and every move, the U.S. has crossed a red line, igniting a powder keg that could explode at any moment, and Tehran is drawing new ones of its own, preparing for a response that will be felt across the globe. The world holds its breath, watching with growing anxiety as the situation spirals further out of control, waiting to see how, when, and where Iran will retaliate and what the full extent of their response will be. The question is no longer if Iran will respond to this act of aggression, but how devastatingly, and what the long-term consequences will be for the region and the world. The path to de-escalation has narrowed to a thread, with diplomatic efforts faltering and trust eroding on all sides. While the road to open war widens with each passing hour, threatening to plunge the Middle East into a conflict unlike any seen before. Operation Midnight Hammer, a codename whispered in the halls of power, a plan years in the making. America's direct strike on Iran, a move that sent shockwaves across the globe, was not a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was the culmination of escalating tensions and a perceived failure of diplomatic efforts. It was executed with chilling precision before dawn, under the cover of darkness, ensuring maximum impact and minimal civilian casualties, at least in theory. U.S. Air Force and Navy assets targeted the Fordo, a deeply buried facility designed to withstand conventional attacks. Natanz, a sprawling complex known for its advanced uranium enrichment capabilities, and Isfahan nuclear facilities, a research and development hub for Iran's nuclear ambitions, aiming to cripple Iran's nuclear program, setting it back years, if not decades. These sites, fortified deep underground, were considered the crown jewels of Iran's nuclear infrastructure. They were hit with powerful bunker-buster bombs, specifically designed to penetrate hardened targets. The Trump administration quickly declared overwhelming success, painting a picture of decisive victory and a major blow to Iranian ambitions. Claiming the strikes obliterated Iran's enrichment capabilities, effectively dismantling their path to a nuclear weapon. Satellite imagery confirmed severe damage, revealing the extent of the destruction inflicted upon the targeted facilities. At all three sites, leaving little doubt about the operation's immediate impact. Washington framed the operation, presenting it to the world as a necessary action to prevent a nuclear-armed Iran and protect Israel, its key ally in the region. The message: the U.S. is willing to use overwhelming force, projecting its power across the globe, not just diplomacy, to achieve its objectives, even at the risk of escalating tensions. The operation's name, Midnight Hammer, a carefully chosen moniker, underscored its brutal finality, leaving no room for ambiguity about the intent and consequences. While some celebrated, hailing the strikes as a victory for peace and security, others warned this hammer blow, a forceful and potentially destabilizing action, shattered a fragile peace, leaving a volatile aftermath and raising the specter of further conflict. The strikes marked a historic escalation, a turning point in the already complex relationship between the U.S. and Iran, fundamentally altering the Middle East's strategic landscape, forcing a reassessment of alliances and power dynamics. The world now faces the consequences, grappling with the potential ramifications of this bold and controversial move. of a direct U.S. military intervention against Iran, a move that could trigger a wider regional confrontation. The region braces for what comes next, uncertain of the future and bracing for potential retaliation. Tehran's response to Operation Midnight Hammer was defiant and furious. The strikes were seen as an assault on Iran's pride and sovereignty, igniting calls for retribution. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei faces immense pressure to respond forcefully. Foreign Minister Araghchi's vow that all options are on the table signals military retaliation is imminent. This strategic ambiguity keeps the US and its allies guessing, heightening regional anxiety. Iran's network of proxies from Hezbollah to the Houthis are now on high alert. The US strikes have empowered hardliners, silencing moderates and fueling calls for revenge. Khamenei must now balance internal demands for vengeance with the risks of all-out war. His decision will shape the Middle East for years to come. 2. The American airstrikes sent shockwaves through the world, exposing deep international divisions. US allies in Europe urged restraint, fearing a spiral of violence. Russia and China condemned the strikes as reckless aggression, calling for immediate de-escalation. Israel praised the operation, seeing it as vital to its security. Arab states, caught in the crossfire, voiced public condemnation but privately worried about regional fallout. The United Nations called for emergency talks, but its influence appears limited. The world is now a spectator to a high-stakes US-Iran confrontation, forced to choose sides or brace for impact. The consequences of this conflict will ripple far beyond the Middle East. The roots of this crisis lie in the shadow war between Iran and Israel, cyber attacks, assassinations, and proxy battles. On June 13, Israel launched a surprise attack on Iranian military and nuclear sites, escalating the conflict. The US intervention followed, backing Israel with overwhelming force. The rationale: defend Israel and finish the job of crippling Iran's nuclear program. This transformed a covert struggle into an open confrontation, with the US now a direct combatant. Any Iranian retaliation could now target both American and Israeli assets. The shadow war is over. Open conflict has begun. The stakes have never been higher for US forces in the region. The US-Israel alliance is now at the center of a volatile, personal conflict. The Middle East faces a dangerous new reality. In a surprising twist, the Trump administration offered to resume diplomatic talks with Iran immediately after the strikes. This olive branch comes as a coercive tactic, military force to drive Tehran back to the negotiating table. The US hopes the shock of the strikes combined with sanctions will force Iran to accept a new deal. But in Tehran, the offer is seen as cynical and humiliating, negotiation under duress. Iranian leaders vowing retaliation are unlikely to accept talks seen as surrender. The international community watches to see if this gambit can succeed. Some hope the devastation might eventually force pragmatism. Others see diplomacy as dead for now. The world wonders, is this a path to peace or just political theater? The ruins of Fordo, Natanz and Isfahan confront Ayatollah Khamenei with a perilous choice. He must weigh demands for immediate retaliation against the risk of devastating war with the US and Israel. One option, launch direct missile strikes on US or Israeli targets, satisfying calls for vengeance but risking massive escalation. Another, unleash proxy forces, Hezbollah, Iraqi militias, the Houthis, to attack American and Israeli interests indirectly. This would inflict pain while maintaining plausible deniability, but still risks spiraling conflict. Or Khamenei could choose strategic patience, absorb the blow, issue fiery rhetoric, and rebuild in secret. This would be politically difficult, but might best ensure regime survival. The Ayatollah must balance national pride with national preservation. Every path is fraught with danger. The world waits for his decision. The fate of the region hangs in the balance. The Middle East stands at a critical crossroads, a region steeped in history and now facing an uncertain future. The decisions made in the coming days and weeks will reverberate far beyond its borders. The potential outcomes are varied, ranging from deeply troubling to outright catastrophic, each path fraught with peril and uncertainty. The worst-case scenario involves widespread devastation, a humanitarian crisis of unimaginable scale, and long-lasting instability. The most immediate and pressing risk is the rapid escalation of current tensions into a full-scale regional war, a conflict that could quickly spiral out of control. Such a war would engulf civilian populations, decimate critical infrastructure like power plants and hospitals, and displace millions. Alternatively, Iran could choose to wage a protracted proxy war, a strategy of indirect conflict that would prolong the instability and suffering. This approach would involve intensifying existing conflicts in already volatile regions such as Lebanon, Syria, a nation already ravaged by years of war, Iraq, struggling to maintain stability amidst internal divisions, and Yemen, where a devastating humanitarian crisis continues to unfold. In this scenario, U.S. forces stationed in the region and Israel would face constant threats and potential attacks, further escalating tensions. Furthermore, global commerce, already strained by various factors, could be severely crippled. This disruption would be driven by attacks on critical oil routes and infrastructure, particularly in strategic choke points like the Strait of Hormuz. Despite the grim outlook, there remains a slim hope for diplomacy and de-escalation, a chance to avert the worst outcomes. However, achieving a diplomatic breakthrough would require immense courage and political will from all parties involved. It would also necessitate robust international mediation, with key global players working together to facilitate dialogue and build trust. To create a conducive environment for negotiations, both sides would need to demonstrate a genuine commitment to de-escalation. This would involve offering real and meaningful concessions, addressing the core grievances, and finding common ground. A more likely scenario, unfortunately, is a tense and precarious armed stalemate, characterized by limited retaliation, a careful calibration of military actions to avoid further escalation, but ultimately, no real resolution to the underlying issues. This would mean an ongoing state of tension, with the potential for renewed conflict always looming. In such a world, the region would live under the constant shadow of renewed war, a persistent threat that would stifle progress and perpetuate instability. Therefore, the international community must urgently and proactively work to widen the narrow path to peace, to create more space for dialogue and diplomacy. The stakes in the Middle East are undeniably global, extending far beyond the immediate regional implications. The decisions and actions taken in the coming days will profoundly shape the future of the world, impacting global security, economic stability, and the lives of countless individuals. The Middle East crisis is not a distant squabble, it's a global emergency. The region is the world's energy heartland. Any conflict threatens vital oil supplies. Disruption in the Strait of Hormuz would send oil prices soaring, triggering global inflation and recession. A wider war would unleash a humanitarian disaster with millions displaced and extremist groups exploiting the chaos. Instability would ripple through Europe, Asia, and North America, threatening security everywhere. Peace in the Middle East is essential for global stability. The decisions made now will test international law diplomacy and our collective ability to avoid catastrophe. This is everyone's problem. The world is watching and its future is on the line.